In November of 2018, the World Federation of Therapeutic Communities decided to have its 2019 board meeting in Thessaloniki, Greece, in conjunction with the European Federation of Therapeutic Communities biannual conference. The World Federation also wanted to host a training institute and asked Naya Arbiter, Rowdy Yates, Kathleen Yates, and Rod Mullen to be trainers for the two-day institute under the auspices of Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. The institute was held on September 17th and 18th with 60 participants from across Europe, the Middle East, and Australia. The focus of the institute was for participants to have a better understanding of the therapeutic community modality from several perspectives. This series of edited videos captures some of the training provided and some of the interactions of the participants with the trainers. Naya Arbiter, co-founder, Vice President of Services and Training for Amity Foundation. Naya Arbiter began at Amity in 1981 and has been responsible for the total transformation of this organization and its recognition nationally and internationally as one of the most innovative and effective. She has developed restorative paradigms for those marginalized through addiction, poverty, racism, sexism, trauma, and violence. She has been recognized for the development of pro-social strategies for people that represent populations that have confounded the mainstream. Her efforts in prisons have evidenced the highest recidivism reduction with the most criminogenic populations ever studied. She authored 14 volumes of TC curriculum which foster personal growth, emotional literacy, and social responsibility. She has served on the Inter-American Commission for Drug Policy, Vice President of Therapeutic Communities of America, Chair of the Standards and Goals Committee of the World Federation of Therapeutic Communities. She has served on numerous scientific committee advisory boards, including that of the National Treatment Improvement Evaluation Study. She was also chosen as one of the conferees for the White House Conference for a Drug-Free America by President Reagan. In 2013, Naya was the second American and the first woman to receive the prestigious Acknowledgement Award of the European Federation of Therapeutic Communities, given to those acknowledged to have made the greatest contribution to the ongoing development of the therapeutic community methodology. Naya is currently the Vice President of Services for Amity Foundation. A native New Yorker, Naya spent her adolescence between New York, Bolivia, and Mexico. She moved to the American Southwest and became involved in using and smuggling drugs over the Mexican and Arizonan border. Arrested in Mexico but released from jail before her 18th birthday, she was given a well-constructed chance by a courageous probation officer to go to the first American TC, which was then known as Synanon. Her life's work has been to construct chances for those in seemingly impossible situations. She lives in Arizona with her husband of 41 years, 3 cats, 3 dogs, 3 parrots, and hope.
So, thank you. So just in terms of definition, sanctuary is a place of refuge. It's an asylum. We know this, but it doesn't mean that it's a space without boundaries, okay? I mean, people get that. It isn't everything goes. In my country, there are many things that contribute to the lack of sanctuary. The climate crisis, and I was so happy that you brought up yesterday the climate refugees. We have thousands of people without homes. On the faculty just at Amity, we have at least 3 people who last year, their whole family's homes burned to the ground with the California wildflowers. There's an incredible gap between the wealthy and the poor, and so forth and so on. In our pharmaceutical industrial complex, our food industrial complex, our military and prisonal industrial complexes all adversely affect the people that come to RTCs more than it affects the wealthy who can do choices. Inside our prisons, of course, it's hard to read it, but about 10 or 15 years ago, we started in the prisons in California to have no warning shots. Years ago, you'd see old movies, a guard would shoot up to the ceiling, to warn everybody, duck. And now there's no warning shots, there's no rubber bullets. If there's a disturbance, it's not called a riot unless somebody's killed. They'll just shoot into the crowd. So that changes the emotional climate. In terms of women, these are for roughly in California, roughly for 200 women incarcerated, they equal on average 700 children. And women are still the primary caregivers. Many of those women don't claim the fathers of their children, so these children end up in the system one way or another. This is the border wall of about 60 or so kilometers from where I live. You had to really work to make something that ugly. It's growing and growing across our nation. It's a multi-billion-dollar effort. This is what it looks like when I go down to Mexico and people are visiting through the wall and trying to say hello to their relatives. Oftentimes the officers will come with machine guns and stop them from doing that. There are places where the wall has not completely been built and there's still some chain link. So this is someone meeting a new baby in the family through the wall. And again, usually, that's stopped by officers. In my particular state, ethnic studies are banned, so Mexican American studies, African American studies, and many of those things are now being pushed out of the schools. Since I've been here, lesbian, gay, LGBTQ studies have been pushed out of the schools also. And I think it's important in the midst of the climate crisis for us to realize that the lack of sanctuary that we have with each other really extends to Mother Earth in so many ways, because so many places really ignore the climate crisis. And that manifests in all different kinds of growing prejudices that we have. A few things that you may or may not be aware of, I'm seeing this with some of the veterans that we're taking in, is this whole issue in the last 10 years of war pornography, where a lot of these soldiers have been taking pictures of people that have been killed or dead and posting them on the dark web. So that's translated into some children and families in Afghanistan and Iraq seeing things that have been posted by U.S. young soldiers, and oftentimes seeing some of their family members who have been deceased or killed, and that's a pretty rocky path. Of course, we have a lot of in Los Angeles, we have hate crimes growing exponentially, and we have a lot going on with white supremacy because our current administration, of course, has given permission for prejudice. And from one perspective, we should say the silver lining is that it's really, really surfaced. From another perspective, it's going to be a lot of work. So when I think about our community work in therapeutic communities, there's of course the addiction, but how critically important it is that we have a great vocabulary. Everyone in this room, whether you're specifically in a therapeutic community or you just came here, there's an interest in community building, and we need community. Perhaps there's never a greater need. It's certainly not in my lifetime. I wasn't alive during the Second World War. The need for building community and building bridges between cultures with each other. And because we're this mirror reflecting the issues of our time, how do we expand our own circle in the therapeutic community to begin to address some of these things and have people feel safe enough to express themselves? I've been blessed with the opportunity from time to time to go to Japan and do some community building work with people there. And just something, like bullying is such a huge issue in Japan, and it's so painful for people, and people don't talk about it enough. And all those little building blocks, when we talk about them, that create, so people can express their pain and transform it in an almost magical way into something useful, makes a difference, not only for the individual, but to the family and community to which those individuals belong when they go forth from our community. Because, community can be a happy, contagious event. It can make people feel awfully good. We all know the difference if you walk into a room and there are two people that are really good friends and they're laughing and they're carrying on, and they turn to us and they say, hey, how are you? Or we walk into a room and there are two people that are talking with each other and they both get silent when we walk in. We know that from the time we're about 6. So the more we can form authentic connection in the TC. I love this tree. It's outside of Guadalajara. It's called by the people in the small village that live there the goddess tree. And I said, why do you call it the goddess tree? They said, because no matter what, it keeps growing. The rock was there, and it just said, we're going to just, the tree decided to keep growing. It's much larger now, but that was quite an effort for the tree, and that's kind of the effort we need to make, I believe. We have to keep growing in our communities. The word remember, of course, comes from the Latin root recordare, which means to pass once again through the heart. Remember is the opposite of dismember, which is to bring back the separated pieces. And in all of our work in the therapeutic community, there's what's right and what's wrong, and then there's the human heart path of the right way. What's the most humane and human thing to do for our people and for situations, and what would we want done for ourselves? So when we don't look at trauma, and we're just looking at only the addiction, it's a very narrow focus. I've had hundreds of people I've known over the last 50 years who told me, I said, well, hey, what did you want to be when you were 6? And they've said, it's not normal to remember anything before you're 12. So, okay, well, let's keep getting to know each other. And, trauma can be like a shotgun instead of a pistol, where if you took a shotgun and hit that wall, it'd blow out everything. It also blows out a lot of the good stuff, a lot of the happy memories. It all just goes away. Loss of the ability to heal ourselves and others. We've had a loss of meaning, a loss of hope, a loss of relationship, and fall into the abyss of the wounded feeling function of our time. And for me, any person that we can help get over the bridge and begin to start growing larger than what wounded them in a way that we will probably never know, will end up being a change agent somewhere for someone else. Because once we've done some of this work ourselves, it's almost reflexive to reach out with gestures of humanity to people that we see that are in pain. And even if we may not be able to get the entire process going for that one person, those little gestures of humanity become reference points for people that motivate them. I mean, there's so many people I've heard that said, my 3rd grade teacher was kind to me, or I was thinking about killing myself, and that day the bus driver said good morning. So, with that, I'm going to say how critical it is again to remember and put back together our experiences and our memories, to create movement back to enthusiasm, the God within, optimism, and play. Play is so important. What do alligators and up-and-coming young executives have in common? They don't play. Okay, we need a lot of play in our community, and everyone deserves spring. We've all lived through springtime, And every single person deserves to have a personal springtime in their own life. And it is, in fact, truly possible. So.